Hi, my name is Josh Hyman. I'm the director of the DNA sequencing facility here at the University of Wisconsin Biotechnology Center, and I'd like to welcome you all. This is the story of one soldier's journey from his home over to Europe during World War II and a rather long trip back. That soldier is PFC Lawrence Gordon. Lawrence Gordon was born in Canada, East End, Saskatchewan. It's a very small town up in Canada. And then as a teenager, he moved down to Casper, Wyoming to work on a ranch. And World War II broke out. And he and his brothers had a discussion, and two of them decided to join the U.S. forces because the U.S. forces were better equipped. Shortly after he got over to Europe, in fact, it was just less than 2 months after, well, about 2 months after D-Day, his armored vehicle that he was traveling in got hit by a tank shell. They were in pursuit of a German courier who was on a motorcycle, and as they were traveling after them, the shell hit. It hit right behind the turret. PFC Gordon and Private Bowman were sitting in the turret. When the shell hit, exploded the gas tank, exploded a lot of the armaments. Their bodies were pretty much non-recognizable at that point. There were two other crew members who managed to escape, but one of them died a few days later. Now, ideally, PFC Gordon would have been identified properly, and he would have ended up in one of the American cemeteries in France, or his body would have been brought home. But years later, when his namesake, Lawrence Gordon, was told by the military accounting community that his body was in fact in St. James Cemetery, or the Brittany American Cemetery in France, in Normandy. And Lawrence went to find his uncle and see the grave that he had promised his father he would visit. He found on the wall of the missing Lawrence S. Gordon, PFC Gordon. His body had not been identified. Fortunately, about 10 years after that, a local filmmaker, Jed Henry, was actually going back and tracing his grandfather's trip, his travels through Europe during World War II. He was following the platoon that actually had one member, Lawrence Gordon, in it. And Jed found out that that was the one member of the platoon that had gone unidentified after World War II. And he jumped on this and started following this and looking for all the paperwork that could possibly lead him to the location of the remains. Fortunately, also, during this trip through all the paperwork, he found a note that said, Lawrence Gordon, the namesake, had been searching some of that same paperwork. Lawrence Gordon had run into a dead end, couldn't find exactly where the remains were, but Jed had a pretty good idea of where they were. It was a beautiful resting place, wonderful. In fact, I would say it would be ideal except for it was the German ossuary in Wiens-sur-Mer in Normandy. You see, right after the tank or the armored car was hit, they took bodies and they put them in temporary graves. They took Private Bowman and they took PFC Gordon and laid them side by side in a temporary grave. And then about a year later dug them up, and they were going to transfer them to a proper burial location. But as it turns out, Private Bowman still had his fingertips intact, and he was identified, but PFC Gordon didn't have any fingertips or anything that was in a good enough condition for them to identify the body, and they had a shirt, jacket, something on his body that was of German make. So they decided that he must be a German soldier and put him in this cemetery. Now, if you look in that cemetery, you'll find a number of crypts all the way around. And each one of those crypts, as you can see, has a lot of nameplates in it. we counted all the nameplates in one of these, and then we started doing some estimates. And there are, in fact, about 12,000 soldiers buried in this particular ossuary. And we also counted these plaques. A German soldier. No other identification. There was nothing on these bodies to tell them who this individual soldier was. So in this one ossuary of 12,000, there are 4,000 unknowns. Most of them are probably German, but I'm guessing some are French, some are British, some are American. We could identify these, but how? As I said, there is no other identification. The historical records, as you go through them, give you some idea. You're a pretty good sleuth if you figure out who they are and where they're buried. But unless you're 100% sure, the American military accounting community won't let you pull out the remains and test them. So Jed showed up here, and he had one question for us. Is there somebody who can do testing on the DNA and give us positive identification? And we said, yeah, we can do that. So we decided to help Jed. Now, in all our cells, we have a nucleus, and it has a set of nuclear DNA. All right, you get half from your mother and half from your father. Now, you'll also notice that down here, you have the sex chromosomes. If you're female, you have an X and an X. So you got one X from your mom, one X from your father. If you're male, you have an X and a Y. The Y you had to get from your father. You also have mitochondrial DNA, and it was pointed out to me earlier that this slide is actually from somebody over in Europe, and they spell it mitochondrium, not mitochondrion. So difference in spelling there if you were to catch that, that's why. But at any rate, you have a lot of copies of this particular mitochondrial DNA in every single cell. You can have 1,000 copies of this to every copy of nuclear DNA you have. It's very abundant. And as I said, it comes through the maternal line. So the Y chromosome comes through the paternal line. The mitochondrial DNA comes through the maternal line, which means that if you're targeting something and testing for relatedness, if you were just looking at nuclear DNA, you can go back through the whole family structure and pick up resemblance between individuals based just on the DNA. So you can match some of the mutations you have to some of the mutations your brothers and sisters have, and all of the ones that you have will be coming from your parents except for the ones that occur in your body over time. If you're doing Y chromosome testing, you'll have to look through the male lineage. So if it's passed on from father to sons, then that'll be passed on to their sons, but it won't be passed on to the daughters. If you're looking at the mitochondrial testing, you'll notice that it passes on from the mother to all of the children, but then only from the sister onto her children. So if you have an unbroken maternal line, you can follow that. And as the case was here, we had both situations. We had PFC Gordon and PFC Gordon's brothers and a sister who had nephews. So we had quite a few people to choose from. And we were lucky because right off the bat, the French crime lab the National Crime Lab decided they wanted to be involved in this. They were the ones who actually treated this. You can see right there the tape. They treated this like a crime scene. They didn't want Lawrence Gordon or any of his brothers to accidentally contaminate the remains. So everyone was held back. You can see they are in garb, complete garb, head to toe. And they did the testing for about 3 months. And our prayers were answered. Yes, it was a perfect mitochondrial match. PFC Gordon was brought home, and he was buried on August 13, 2014, 70 years to the day that he was killed in France. Now, we have about 78,000 unknown soldiers, unidentified soldiers from World War II. About 10,000 of those, as far as I know, are in cemeteries either in Europe or in the United States. We have the ability to identify almost every single one of those if we have family references or if we have something that was theirs before they left. Let's say a baby tooth, hair, or something like it. We could actually go through, and I don't think you can see it up here on the screen as well as I can see it, but it says, "Here rests in honored glory a comrade in arms, known but to God." We can change that. And right now, we are trying to set up a center of excellence here at the university. We have forensic anthropologists, we have forensic odontologists, we have students who are veterans who are willing to help us out with the historical record and go back through all the documents. And hopefully, we'll be allowed to get in to some of these cemeteries or the ossuaries, extract some of the teeth or a small piece of bone, and identify some of these soldiers, because there are families right now, there are many families in the U.S. with 90-year-old, 85-year-old members who just want to see their brother or sister or, in some cases, an uncle brought home and laid to rest. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Yes?